Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking once again at the July suggestions passed to the developers, and this will be the third and final video looking at what has been passed. We've had a look at aviation, had a look at ground. Now in this video it's time to look at naval forces, and then the miscellaneous part, you know, the gameplay stuff, the interface stuff, the fun stuff, as I like to call it. So let's get started talking about some of the naval things. There's only two of them so far, and they're both large ships. So the first one is from Shadow Ranger CZ, and he wants to see the USS Hull. Now, the USS Hull was a Forrest Sherman class destroyer. It was the last class of non-missile DDs that was created, and on top of it, what it has is two very interesting ideas. First of all, it has a massive 203mm gun on the front of it that you can see here, and then it also is packing two 127mm that you can see here. But something to pay attention to is the fire rate of these guns. So the 203mm on the front has access to 12 RPM. So that means 12 rounds per minute. That means it has a fire rate of 5 seconds per round. Then, if you have a look at the 127mm, 28 rounds per minute. So you're nearly up to 2-second reload time, just a little bit more than 2 seconds. That is insane. That is very much HMS Tiger levels, maybe even slightly better, or pretty much the same. So it would definitely have a lot of firepower coming from it. Now, also remember, this is a destroyer. It isn't a light cruiser or a heavy cruiser, but it definitely would be on those higher echelons, even though it doesn't have a lot of, you know, other stuff on top of it. It only really has the main guns, which are going to make a massive difference. It does also have torpedo tubes, though, 6 of them overall, so it would be nice to see them come into action, and of course the Hedgehog and DCR available. So in the 70s, you know, when everyone was making transitions to missile DDs, and that's pretty much commonplace nowadays, there was still room for a few machines which were only gun only, and why not have in the USS Hull, since it is one of the last ones? It could be one of those ones to top off the tech tree, which wouldn't be a terrible idea. The next one is going back a little bit in time, back to pre-World War II, and also used in World War II, and we're having a look at the Yubari. This is from Azens, and the light cruiser Yubari is what we're talking about today. So the Yubari is another one of these ideas from Japan where they made a small machine with a lot of payload on it. There's something you'll find with a lot of their light cruisers and destroyers is they are generally not as big as other countries, but they pack a lot of firepower. And obviously this is good if you want to be able to absolutely decimate the enemy when you find them, but at the same time it does have its drawbacks. Generally in the distance department, normally these things' range isn't as good, and also as well you have an issue with the displacement of the machine. Since it's incredibly heavy, sometimes it can run into a few issues down the line. So the Yubari was a Class 2 cruiser, and the weapons itself, as it says here, it was the same as a 5500 T-class cruiser, but the displacement was only 3,500 tons. So you can see that this is an incredibly light cruiser compared to some of the others that were around at the time, and this led into problems later on. So during World War II, what we saw a lot of, especially for Japanese machines, is a massive emphasis on upgrading their anti-air capabilities. The reason for this, of course, is because air became a massive prevalent force in naval forces, which is why you see a lot of machines, especially destroyers and light cruisers from the Japanese. Their early war variants will have very large main guns, but not a lot of AA on them. But by 44, 45, they have a ton of 25mm, they have a decent amount of 13.2s, they have anything which is there to try and take down airplanes, and the Yubari was kind of the same. The problem is, though, because of the size of the Yubari not being very big, it needed to lose some of its main guns in order to accommodate the anti-air components that it, required. And this is shown if you go to here. in the comparisons. So the Yubari early builds, this will be in the 20s and the 30s, you can see it had 6 140mm, 3 on the front and 6 on the side. It had one 7.62 anti-aircraft gun, 2 7.7mm and 2 61cm twin torpedo tubes, so 4 on each side. Then if we go to the 1944 variant, it loses 2 main guns, so it's down to 4 140mm, and then it has one 12.7mm anti-aircraft gun, but 25mm when it comes to its machine guns, which would obviously be mainly used for anti-air, and then of course the complement of 2 61cm torpedo, twin torpedo tubes, so 4 tubes on each side. So you can see that it loses 2 main guns to gain a ton of 25mm. Now, generally, this would be okay, of course, and it means that you could fit in 2 Yubaris in the tech tree. We haven't really seen too much of the idea of having the same ship but in different forms, and I think this could be a nice test case for that. You know, you put in the Yubari pre-war and then you put in the Yubari 1944, and you know, you could have a really nice go at it. So yeah, why not chuck this in as well? Now we're on to the miscellaneous or mechanics part, and this is from MH4UA Astragan, and I've actually talked to this guy quite a bit over on the Tech Hub Discord, and also, you know, through just general meetings and seeing comments and stuff, and it's always nice to have a chat to community members. You know, that's one of the largest reasons why I do this. It's incredibly fun just talking to people. So his idea is to make former event, CBT and rare vehicles available through conditional unlocks in the US tech tree. Now, one of the problems with this suggestion is I see a lot of people are commenting on his description of these vehicles and what they are, and they're completely missing the point. It doesn't really matter what his opinions on the vehicles are. What matters is he wants to bring them back for the average player if they missed them in the past, and he wants to do this through different ways. As you can see, here is some of the ways that he would bring back vehicles such as the I-301, the TU-2, which I believe was a CBT vehicle, the T-26E, the KV-220, the M3 Lee Lend-Lease, all of these things. And these are the different ways he'll bring them back. So unlocking a certain rank of vehicle, as is done with the Kingfishers being available after unlocking rank 2 US. This is also a case for the French vehicles that were taken out, and also the Japanese. Spading specific vehicles, playing a given vehicle in a certain number of matches, spading an entire tier in particular, and for the rarest things, spading whole trees up to a particular BR. Now, I don't think these are terrible ideas. I generally like the idea of bringing back event vehicles in a way so newer players can get to them. I don't really subscribe to the idea of uniqueness, especially when it comes to specific vehicles, like vehicles that have been in the game for like 5 years or something, and you know, not many people have them. Stuff like the KV-220 and machines like that. And I understand people wanting to, you know, wanting to keep their uniqueness, but why not make it so if you spade the whole Soviet tree, you get your hands on the KV-220? Now, you do run into the issue there, where the players who already have them, you know, still have them, but the best players of a specific nation get those vehicles as well, and especially when it comes to the 220, they can definitely be seen as broken in a specific way in specific matchups. So yeah, that is something to think about. But I think overall, having a system put in so you can research former old vehicles is fine. We do have a qualifier though, and nowadays the qualifier is unfortunately the market, and that means that there are some vehicles that are just never going to be coming back in an event capacity because they're being sold on the market. And this means that the market vehicles will stay high in price, because the moment you bring them back in this scenario, there's going to be a lot more of them flooded onto the market, and that means that people are going to lose a lot of money, they're going to be incredibly annoyed, and so on and so forth. So if you're willing to do that, you know, fair enough, but there is there's definitely an argument for keeping the price high and making these vehicles a little bit more unique than they, are. But something like a T-26E or something like a M3 Lee, Lend-Lease, some of the lower tier vehicles like the Hydroplane, which came back in the box recently, the event box for the Warbond shop, stuff like the P-43, the Lancia, or even the P-51A, or the Ki-21 1 High, which has, the only real difference is, of course, the turrets that are on it. So you could definitely bring these back in a specific way and filling in these criteria. I think it's a good idea overall, but I would only do it to the lower tier ones, just so if you're new to the game, you can get yourself some specials along the way. So let's say if you spade the whole of Japanese rank 1 aircraft, you get yourself the Ki-21 1 High. I think that's a great idea, and it gives people a hidden incentive to work towards. And, you could have achievements based around this. You could say, okay, here's an achievement, put it in your face. If you spade all these vehicles, you get this vehicle. And, people would be happy about it, just like how, the French and the Japanese work for it. And in my estimation, stuff like the Ki-21 1 High is not going to be a vehicle which is going to be massively sought after. Same with stuff like the T-26E, but it is a vehicle that would be nice to new players to get themselves a premium, to get them started, especially after they've just finished rank 1, to make them play a little bit more of rank 1, maybe get some more experience. And once again, just like squadron vehicles, just like normal research, just like Warbond stuff, it's another thing to think about while you're, playing the game. It's another thing to work towards, whether it be decals, whether it be certain achievements. You need more than one thing to focus on at once, otherwise, you're gonna go crazy, like you see a lot of people do at top tier when they're researching specific vehicles and not looking at anything else. The next one is from Flamme Bleu, and it's talking about deleting the chat. Now, when I saw the title of this, I thought it was talking about chat in game, if you're in a mission or if you're in a PvP game, and I was like, how are you going to do that? But then I realized it's just talking about chats when you're in the game and you see a bunch of chats and you open your own chat and you want to talk to a few specific people. Unfortunately, you can't just, close a chat. So here you can see, here there is no closing the chat over here. Instead, you have to destroy the whole tab. So for him, he just wants to be able to close specific tabs and get rid of, specific chat things, especially when a question has been answered or something has been solved. And I think that's a fine idea, why not? You might as well. It's not a huge thing, but it's definitely a nice little feature that would be lovely to see. The next one is from the Hayden, I think is how you say that, or Theoden, one of the two. And the idea here is just to show both IAS and TAS at the same time. Now, in War Thunder, you can either show indicated airspeed or true airspeed, I think it is. I can't remember exactly what it is because I always just use indicated. And you have to choose between them. And what he's saying here is that if you're using IAS, move close to your redline speed at higher altitudes, and that's when you're using TAS, actually. It still shows your IAS when you go into redline, which is kind of weird. But for me, I would just say everyone should use IAS instead of getting confused by using the two different ones. But if there was an option to just show them simultaneously, you could do it. I think it would just confuse people more. It would have been much better just to have one reading instead of two in the first place, but showing both of them, sure, why not? And then if someone gets confused, you can just say blah 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 IAS or blah 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 TAS. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. There's, more information is more power to the individual, so I'm completely fine with it. It would just have been better if, when the game started out, one of them was picked over the other. The next one is from Lord of Sofa, and is talking about replenishment ships. So if you don't know what replenishment ships are, they're pretty much just resupply ships. These things would be used to go and resupply ships. I don't know how else to say it. So as it says here, to resupply boot squadrons operating far away from friendly harbors, navies all around the world did and still use replenishment ships. So ships which carry supplies in specific ways. See them as, if you don't know a lot about naval, you know how nowadays you can have aircraft which refuel other aircraft in the air? Well, think about that, but from a naval perspective. That's very similar to that. And they would be able to help rearm ships, they would be able to refuel ships, give supplies, all of these wonderful things. And the idea of this is so you could have them work kind of like airfields when it comes to the naval portion of the game. So you would have these, walkabouts, and I'm guessing you could destroy them, but instead of having to get to a capture point to reload your guns, or maybe to get an increased a decreased repair time, or a decreased other time when it comes to trying to fix yourself, you could just have these things near different areas of the map. Now, there is definitely an issue in naval where if you are an individual who's worried about your ammo exploding and you don't take a ton of rounds, then you have to get to a capture point to resupply. And normally the capture points, especially in larger tier battles, are incredibly dangerous to be around if you are a larger ship. So therefore, or even a smaller ship, so therefore having this idea of an airfield, but in naval form, I think is a great idea. And yes, you could kill them when it comes to the game. The only issue is, of course, torpedoes, and trying to stop them getting torpedoed, because I feel like once someone has a shot on these things, they're just going to torpedo them straight away. And if the AI is the AI that stays in War Thunder, it will normally just follow tram lines and around the map, and you'll be able to hit it very easily. And if it's stationary, well, it will be even easier. I like the idea. I think it's a pretty cool idea, and also you can see that they can defend themselves. They have got guns on them. Maybe you give them a health bar similar to airfields, but I think it would rather be better just to have a few of them around the map instead of just one. So yeah, great idea, really like it. Thank you to Lord of Sofa. The next one is from Maximilian, and he's talking about thermal bending and gun tube droop. So, two realistic factors which would make the game very much unbearable. So, first of all, you have thermal bending, and this is in his own words, and I think it's a good layman's take. So, thermal bending is a deformation of the main gun that is caused by environmental factors like air temperature and the sun. Then gun tube droop is a deformation in the main gun that is caused by the heat and stress of discharging the main gun. So if you fire a gun over and over and over and over and over again, especially in quick succession, what you will find is the barrel will eventually become warped because of the heat that is involved on the barrel itself, which will force it to bend in a specific way. And this is just an unfortunate thing that happens, especially when it comes to a lot of physics, I suppose. Yeah, you would class it as physics, where heat exchange is such a massive thing. If you've ever lived in a climate which is quite extreme, so I used to live in Calgary, and Calgary in the winter could get down to -40, and then in the summer it could get up to +35. So you would have issues where in the winter stuff would contract a lot, and then in the summer it would have to expand again. What this does is it means that the material, this used to happen to concrete a lot, where it would contract, and then in the summer as it expanded, it would crack, and crack hard, meaning that your structural integrity was a lot lower than it would normally be if you weren't in extreme conditions. Well, the extreme condition here is shooting the gun. That is forcing an extreme condition. But anyway, moving on from that. So the thing is, modern tanks, such as the M1A1, they have certain systems which are designed to counter or negate the effects of both of these phenomena. So one of them is a thermal sleeve. So the thermal sleeve is a shroud that encompasses the main gun that prevents thermal bending. And then also it has an MRS system, or a muzzle reference system, which is a front front sight the tank uses to negate the effects of the gun tube droop and also the thermal bending. So this is a issue that a lot of tanks run into, and therefore people have created a way to get around the issue that is created. The problem with this, though, is it is the same as a lot of other mechanics that could be added to the game. This is a feast or famine mechanic, meaning that specific vehicles would have it and other specific vehicles wouldn't. Therefore, you are putting a massive barrier of entry between one and the other. Very much similar to thermal sights, like I've talked about before. If you give only specific vehicles thermal sights and don't give other vehicles thermal sights, you are making one set of vehicles incredibly good compared to the other ones based around mechanics. And the way that Maximilian talks about it here, so the example he gives is a vehicle without these systems could incur a 1% accuracy penalty for every 10 rounds fired to simulate gun tube droop. Thermal bending can be simulated through a 5% accuracy penalty for desert and tropical conditions. So if I don't have these systems, which I cannot control at all, I'm already at a 5% accuracy penalty, and if I fire 10 more rounds, I'm at a 6% accuracy discrepancy against my enemy who does have these modifications. Like, can you imagine how annoying this would be? If like it sounds great if you're on one side of the issue. If you were an M1A1 player and you want to become more dominant, because remember, the M1A1 right now still has a 65% win rate, right? So it's winning the majority of its battles. But if they add in a system like this and you're on the M1A1 side, you're going to love it. What if you're on another side which doesn't have this technology? You're already at a 5% accuracy penalty to a vehicle that has already got a positive win rate. Like, it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun. This is not a mechanic that everyone can use. This is a mechanic which is an incredible positive for someone, an incredible negative for others. What you want to do is to create a mechanic that can benefit everyone, and in their own different ways. So it gives both sides more options, more tools to work towards an interesting idea or work towards a specific playstyle. But if you create a mechanic which is feast or famine, what you get is just a horrible situation where that forces people away from vehicles which don't have the mechanic. Losing 5% of accuracy, if you don't have, let's say, adjustment of fire, or if you don't have a very good gunner, is crippling to a vehicle. And even if you do have those modifications, we've had it so many times. My personal experiences have got better because I think they increase the accuracy of a lot of guns. But back in the day, firing something like an MBT-70 or firing something like a Chieftain Mark III, especially the Chieftain Mark III, which should be one of the most accurate guns in game, it was like firing at angles. Meaning that if I was firing at 1,000 meters, the dispersion would be around 5 degrees from where I was firing, which should never be the case. That should have never happened. And luckily now it's a lot better, especially now that I have the upgrades, that I have the crew, and the fact that they made it more accurate. But if they also added another system on top of that to make it 5% less accurate, I would have just dropped the vehicle. I'm just not interested in playing a vehicle which is a long-range vehicle that is supposed to be accurate, and it's not accurate. So yeah, this system, great for some, horrible for others, therefore it's a no from me, dog. The next one is from Howard Hughes, 1947, and he's basically talking about the idea of having more realistic Ju-87 Stuka sirens. Now, in the game, we don't have a ton of Stuka sirens, or at least we don't have a ton of Stukas which would have had sirens on them. But hopefully, with the increased expansion of Ju-87s, we saw some for the Italians. Hopefully the Ju-87T comes in at some point, you know, the torpedo version, I'm not sure you class it as a prototype version, but I mean, there wasn't a lot of them made, but basically a Ju-87 that could carry a torpedo. It should be really fun, especially now Naval's around. The constant expansion of vehicles like that, especially now the Ju-87 got a HD remake, remember? So why not have in a sound which makes the Stuka Siren sound great? I think that's a definite possibility to add. I definitely think it should be here, and why not? You know, more realistic sounds is better. I know for a fact that they're working on a new sound system in War Thunder. Unfortunately, there was supposed to be a stream with the main sound design guy from Gaijin, and I don't think it ever went through. So hopefully, at some point, we will see that stream. Because I really want to see, you know, what it's going to sound like. I'm hoping that Gamescom maybe shed some light on it. We'll see, you know. It's as simple as that. So yeah, I hope we see better sounds. I hope we overall see, you know, an improvement in that. The one main thing in sounds that War Thunder needs to fix is it still can't overlap sounds really well. So do this, right? Get a bunch of friends. Maybe 3, 4, or 5 of you, and get together in jets or even props and just fly in a straight line, and then go into a replay of that, and then just do the camera angle where it's looking at you, and then you fly past the camera, and then listen to the sounds. The sounds do not mesh together. Instead, they cut off each other. So what you'll hear is new, 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 and it just sounds horrific instead of them all being together. And this is something you see in tanks as well when they fire, and also their engines, so hopefully that eventually is fixed. The last one is from FS Avix, and he wants to improve environmental sounds. And he does a really nice video here, and the video itself, it has sounds of birds, it has sounds of the wind. The wind's a little bit strong in my opinion, but it's there. And also sounds of rivers. So the idea is to just make more ambient sound around the place. And overall I can understand this, but at the end of the day, tanks are quite loud. So hearing stuff like birds when you are in a tank is probably not going to happen. Either the birds have walked away or flown away because of the fact that there's a tank in the area, or you're just not going to hear it because all you're going to hear is the engine. Now, when it comes to a waterfall or a stream, yeah, okay, fair enough, you might be able to hear that. But something like a bird or the wind is going to be overtaken by the engine unless it's incredibly strong wind. So, yeah, it seems a little bit odd when looking at it from a tank perspective, but from an air perspective, like if you're on an airfield with your engine off and you're just sitting there, it would be loved to hear more stuff. Maybe a little bit of chatter from the people around you on the airfield. Maybe the sound of trucks going by. Maybe the idea of, once again, birds or wind or something. Yes, ambient sounds make everything a lot better. You know, they make you more immersed in the environment. And as it says here, we've had a lot of graphical upgrades over the last years or so, so why not some sound upgrades? And as I said, I'm sure the sound upgrades are coming because, you know, they've said that they're coming, and they also put a lot of stuff into the updates or the last updates which will facilitate, you know, better sound. So hopefully, you know, we see them soon. Whether it comes to ambient sounds, I would much more prefer them work on the, you know, as I said, the meshing of sounds. But ambient sounds is always good, you know, at the end of the day. Maybe not for ground vehicles, but definitely for air vehicles when it's a lot more silent when your engine is off. Anyway, those were all of the suggestions for the miscellaneous stuff for this month. Hopefully some of these get implemented. I think there was a lot of interesting stuff this time. Mainly the ground vehicle stuff was very interesting, and a few, you know, aviation stuff which was fun. But the main stuff that to me is interesting is stuff like this. The making special vehicles available through conditional unlocks, and also replenishment ship. That to me is really cool. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Martinez, Moxie, Alobralo, Super Cacti, Grisvolk, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.